Tonight on In Focus, the United States enters a turbulent week that exposes the widening power of state governments on national security questions and the expanding assertiveness of the White House on cross-border treaties. In Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis has followed Texas in taking the unprecedented step of designating the Muslim Brotherhood and CAIR as foreign terrorist organizations under state authority, setting off a legal and political earthquake. Supporters call it long overdue, and the groups targeted are heading to court. At the same time, President Donald Trump is imposing a 5% tariff on Mexico, accusing it of violating the 1944 Water Treaty, while announcing $12 billion in emergency aid to farmers caught in the widening trade crossfire. So how will these dual confrontations reshape U.S. law, diplomacy, and domestic politics? I'm Hala Al-Hamalawi. Welcome to In Focus. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced on December the 8th, 2025, that the state has classified the Council on American Islamic Relations, known as CAIR, and the Muslim Brotherhood as foreign terrorist organizations, effective immediately. According to Axios, the executive order directs state agencies to block unlawful activities by these groups, including denying contracts, funding, or benefits to anyone providing material support. DeSantis linked CAIR to the Muslim Brotherhood. This follows Texas Governor Greg Abbott's similar designation last month, prompting CAIR to sue there. CAIR, the largest U.S. Muslim civil rights group founded in 1994, denies ties to terrorism and calls the order defamatory and unconstitutional, vowing legal action. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis issued an executive order placing the Muslim Brotherhood and the Council on American Islamic Relations CAIR on the state's list of foreign terrorist organizations. The move mirrors Texas' November 18th order under Governor Greg Abbott. Both states now bar contracts, grants, state employment links, and in Texas' case, land purchases tied to these groups or alleged affiliates. The federal government has not designated either group as a terrorist organization, a point emphasized across AP, Axios, Al Jazeera, and other outlets. CAIR is preparing an immediate legal challenge, arguing the orders are unconstitutional, defamatory, and politically motivated. To unpack the legal and political stakes, we're joined by Mrs. Ginger Chapman, lawyer and political analyst, joining us from Washington. Always a pleasure having you, Mrs. Chapman. Now, let's begin with the basics. What exactly did Governor DeSantis announce yesterday, and how closely does it replicate the earlier Texas order?
Well, first, Hala, thank you for having me today, and greetings to your viewers. And what we are seeing with both Texas and Florida, as a background, this is part of a big push by the Israeli Foreign Ministry to dictate and control the discussion in the United States. We saw that last month. Governor Abbott of Texas is attempting to designate CAIR, Muslim Brotherhood, as terrorist organizations. Now DeSantis has followed suit. And from a legal standpoint, these state efforts are not likely to succeed. We see that CAIR has already filed a lawsuit against Texas on the grounds of defamatory, and it's unconstitutional. And indeed, it is unconstitutional, and it's preempted by federal law. First, under our Constitution, the executive branch, the presidency, has broad and exclusive powers over foreign relations, over matters of international law and dealings with foreign countries and foreign entities. And then also under our federal laws, our immigration law, our terrorism laws. Once again, the president has exclusive and broad authority over matters pertaining to national security, threats to the United States, and also international treaties and foreign relations. Now, we know that President Trump has also issued an executive order attempting to designate Muslim Brotherhood and CAIR as foreign terrorist organizations, and this too is unlikely to succeed if challenged for several reasons. First Amendment, free speech, and due process rights. This is also another reason the states are not likely to succeed. The organizations have free speech and due process rights. Also, from the point of view of the American government, there's no direct evidence tying these groups to any terrorist activity. Also, international law considerations. And finally, many of our own federal agencies also work with the Muslim Brotherhood in other countries where they're legitimate parts of governments, and also with CAIR.
Well, that's a very interesting point, Mrs. Chapman. I would like to elaborate on it, and I would like to utilize the fact that you're a lawyer and we can talk about the legal aspects of the issue. But I want to go to the question now that both orders make sweeping claims. From your own assessment, Mrs. Chapman, what are the most consequential practical measures that these states are now enforcing?
Well, we know that the consequential effects are to prohibit any members of the group or anyone that supports their groups from obtaining state contracts, from purchasing land. However, this is going to be very difficult to carry out. In other words, will every land purchase in Texas require the purchaser to sign affidavits or disclose political leanings or to submit financials of political support? So this also impacts not just the groups themselves, but the rights of American citizens and citizens of those states. So this is essentially unworkable when put into practice. It's highly symbolic, and surprisingly, this is also angering the American people. Once again, we have seen concerted efforts on the part of the Israeli Foreign Ministry to control the discussion in America by passing anti-free speech laws that persecute criticizing Israel or Israel's policies. We've seen persecutions of students. And indeed, one of the more alarming things, we are now seeing the Israeli government target Christian churches and target faith leaders. They are also inviting politicians on the state level to travel to Israel, paying for their expenses. So this is also bringing up important matters of political influence and campaign donations. Overall, this is becoming very messy legally within the United States, and it's having the opposite effect. It is actually driving the American public to be more skeptical of Israel and to turn against their blatant attempts to control America's free speech and First Amendment rights. So the practical effects on the ground in the states will have a great deal of difficulty trying to even implement any restrictions geared towards investigating or prohibiting members of the group or supporters of the group from carrying out normal activities that other state citizens can. And indeed, this could embroil the state, both Texas and Florida, in lawsuits. And the risk of the lawsuits is if and when a court rules in favor of the group's First Amendment rights, this then further limits and forecloses avenues that the states could legally take. So the states run the risk of having the courts spell out and define their limitations, which would restrict them. That's always a risk going to court. And once again, on a national level, this is pushing our conflicts with Israel into the spotlight. And once again, the American people it's having the opposite effect, and there's blowback
Frustrated.
from the American people. Exactly. Thank you, Hala.
You're welcome. Now, the federal government has not designated CARE or the Muslim Brotherhood as terrorist organizations. How does this limit what other states are doing at the moment?
Yes. Well, because the federal government has broad and exclusive authority over international relations, over matters of national security, any perceived threats to the nation, this is going to set up another battle between the executive branch and between the legislature. Now, one thing we know with President Trump is he does not appear to have any follow through. Trump likes to make grand, bold pronouncements. He's very provocative. And then he moves on. He does not have follow through with the original issue, and it appears to be forgotten. So even though our Congress and our federal legislature can pick this up and can challenge President Trump on this, he has made no concrete or tangible steps to follow through on designating any of these entities a terrorist group. So his executive order is just left hanging, twisting in the wind, with no other pronouncements, no other specific steps that the federal government is going to take to follow through or back up his executive order. Now, our Congress can challenge this, but right now there is nothing to challenge. Because there's been no action, there can only be a challenge when there's some sort of action or damage, or one of the groups themselves challenges the designation.
But
Yes,
Mrs. Chapman, let's talk from a legal perspective, since you are a lawyer. CARE has already announced that it will sue Florida, just as it did with Texas. So from a legal perspective, what will courts examine first? First Amendment issues, due process, or state authority?
They will first examine the state authority. They are going to look at the designations, the executive orders, and they will say, does the state even have the authority, or is this preempted by the federal government's authority and jurisdiction over matters that have to do with international relationships, also with national security and perceived threats to the United States. And this is because, from a federal standpoint, the states cannot all speak with different voices. We need to speak with one voice when it comes to international matters.
Yes.
This gives the United States predictability and consistency, and this is what our law relies on: predictability, consistency, and foreign entities need to know how they are governed and what they are permitted to do. And if each state comes up with their own rules, then this throws the American federal
system
our federal
into
laws
chaos.
into chaos.
Yes.
Exactly. It throws it into chaos.
Yes.
And this has been litigated by the Supreme Court before, when states such as Arizona and Florida have tried to preempt the federal government on matters of immigration. On matters of national security, they are going to be held to an even higher bar, to an even higher standard. And then after the court deals with the jurisdictional issues, then they may move on to look at the First Amendment issues, the free speech rights, not just of the groups, but also of the individuals in those groups. And then the due process. Do these groups, do these individuals, have they had their say in court to confront their accusers and to present their side of the issue?
Yes.
So the state efforts are unlikely to succeed. This is all theater. It's all a show. And this is being driven by, once again, desperation on the part of the Israeli government. They are interfering and meddling more with American domestic policy. They're interfering more with public relations. We have word that they have hired groups to surveil Christian churches in some parts of the country and to track the movements of individuals in those churches. So we are getting word and more indication that the Israeli government, specifically their foreign ministry, is becoming more desperate and more aggressive in their public relations, their propaganda, their hasbara on the American people. They're interfering with churches, pastors, state politicians, as well as congressional, national politicians. And the overall effect it's having on the American citizens themselves is to create resistance. Americans are rebels by nature. We do not like people telling us what to do, what to think, or what to say. And this push by the Israeli government and their foreign ministry is angering the American people. And once again, it's creating deeper divisions amongst the American people, within our churches, on our streets, and even within our Congress. And now it's setting up a legal battle between the president's executive orders and Congress, and also setting up legal battles between the states and the presidential executive authority. So altogether, this is not smoothing the path for Israel and their propaganda in the United States. It's only creating more blowback, more legal issues, and highlighting the American people's displeasure at essentially being manipulated or used by the Israeli government.
Okay. Well, I would like just to make a point here, Mrs. Chapman. I don't know if you would agree with me here, but apart from CARE, the Muslim Brotherhood is already listed as a terrorist organization in many countries around the world. Not in the United States, of course, but in many countries around the world. So how do you view this?
Well, one way to view this is a sign of the chaotic nature of American politics. We are a large country. We have so many agencies that many of our agencies are working actively with groups that other agencies may not approve of. But more importantly, because the Muslim Brotherhood is a large, decentralized organization, there's no leader. They have many different groups, many different chapters that engage in many different types of activity. It could be political activity, charitable activity, diplomatic activity, even military activity. But because it encompasses so many groups, our federal government has to look at each group individually. We cannot collectively punish all of the groups that may be under this umbrella. And the Muslim Brotherhood does have political organizations that are active in countries that we do work with, Pakistan, Indonesia, many of the countries in Southeast Asia. So we do work with specific groups that are associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. There are other groups that we do not approve of, but because of American politics, and because of our American legal system, essentially due process, we need to have a clear understanding of what we're doing and the implications and the rights of these groups to participate in the legal process. We are more constrained with blanket judgments, and many of the countries that have designated the Muslim Brotherhood as terrorist as a terrorist group in their countries, perhaps they have interactions with specific Muslim Brotherhood groups that they are familiar with, that their countries have gone through the legal process, the political process to reach this designation, which the United States has not done, once again, because we are a very big, messy country, and this is our political and our legal way.
Well, Mrs. Ginger Chapman, thank you so much for your insights. Always a pleasure having you with us. And as states push outward, International Security Authority, Washington is escalating its own tools of pressure, not against civil society groups, but across international borders. Overnight, President Donald Trump authorized a 5% tariff on Mexico over alleged water treaty violations and unveiled a massive support package for U.S. farmers bracing for new economic turbulence. Let's turn to the second major front shaping American politics this week. President Donald Trump has threatened a 5% tariff on Mexican imports unless Mexico releases 200,000 acre-feet of water from the Rio Grande by December 31st, addressing Texas farmers' shortages under the 1944 Water Treaty. The Newsweek stated that the treaty requires Mexico to deliver 1.75 million acre-feet every 5 years from 6 tributaries, but Mexico lags behind, owing over 800,000 acre-feet amid droughts and infrastructure issues. Texas crops and livestock suffer while Mexico aids Lake Mead but prioritizes local needs like cattle industries. Trump's demand equates to 65 billion gallons, echoing April threats resolved temporarily via agreements for extra deliveries. President Donald Trump issued a stark ultimatum to Mexico. Deliver the water the U.S. says it is owed under the 1944 Water Treaty, including 200,000 acre-feet by December 31st, or face escalating trade penalties. Hours later, the White House introduced a $12 billion farm aid package funded largely through tariff revenue, meant to shield U.S. producers from the ripple effects of trade disruptions. Mexico has cited hydrological stress and drought, while analysts warn that using tariffs to enforce a water treaty is both novel and diplomatically risky. Joining us from now is Mr. Maher Nicholas Fresley, Executive Director of the European Asian Center, joining us from Paris. Welcome, Mr. Maher. Now, let's begin with the timeline. What exactly did President Donald Trump announce regarding both the tariff treaty and the farm aid?
I'm delighted to join you today from Paris. The real timeline, I think, is 11 months precisely from today, when President Trump would be faced with the midterm elections, where a big chunk of the seats on Capitol Hill, both in the U.S. Senate and Congress, will come for renewal, right? And these midterm elections are going to be difficult anyway, because it's always difficult for a president, and usually, statistically, most American presidents in the past 100 years have lost, their party has lost a few seats during the midterm elections, and the Republican majority today is very small, right? So his party, in 11 months, they need to make a good score to keep their seats on Capitol Hill. And what Trump is doing now is rejigging the American economy, and much more than that, he's reshaping the world economy. And so it takes 5, 10, 15 years, right?
Yes.
For him to do that, to re-industrialize America. And when I say re-industrialize, I include agro-industry and agricultural production and agricultural infrastructure. All that takes time. And the problem is, the midterm elections, they come in 11 months, right? So 11 months is a short time, 10, 15 years to rejig the world economy and reindustrialize America is a long time. And so Trump needs to do something quick and he needs to have quick wins. He needs to show swing voters in two states, the agricultural states where they vote, farmers voted for him massively in these states, and the Rust Belt industrial working for the rich, he's also working for the working class and the farmers. Then he will win, his party will win the elections in 11 months. So I think that's why Trump is really focusing on that. And it's true that over the years, Mexico has not respected, has not abided by the spirit and the letter of the 1944 Water Sharing Treaty.
Exactly. But the dispute involves this 1944 U.S.-Mexico Water Treaty that we're talking about. For viewers unfamiliar with its structure, how does the treaty allocate water, and what does the U.S. claim Mexico has failed to deliver? Which you were just trying to tell me now. I want more elaboration and explanation.
So to make a long and complicated story short, right? It's about, sharing the Rio Grande, right? The Rio Grande, and the name of that river, that giant river, which is also the border, the border between Mexico and America, is inspired from medieval Arabian Spanish geography. It was a term first used by Arab geographers in the Middle Ages. Al-Wadi al-Kibir, or Al-Wadi al-Kabir.
The Grand Valley.
Is that big river in the south of Spain. And then the Spanish people, the Mexicans, use the same name, Al-Wadi al-Kabir, the Rio Grande, to describe that river. And in 1944, there was a bunch of American dam engineers and diplomats who met with their, Mexican counterpart to agree on the split of water. Back then, 1944, Mexico was a very poor country. Okay, so when you're a very poor country, and America was really bigger than today, so America's relative size in the world economy was even bigger than today. So of course, when you negotiate, when you're a Mexican, it's not a well-balanced negotiation. So the Mexicans made concessions, but they signed. And when you sign a treaty,
it's mandatory.
You cannot say, oh, but 80 years ago, we were a country. And you cannot say what the Mexicans are saying today, we have a drought. Because it's too easy to say, we have a drought today, we had a drought last year. 80 years ago, our country was poor.
In short, there are no exceptions when it comes to signing a treaty. Each party would be committed to it, regardless of any other circumstances that have occurred or might occur.
Exactly. It's cruel, but dura lex, sed lex. The law is hard, the law is difficult, but that's the law. Now, at the same time, Trump is exaggerating a little bit. So he's saying, in essence, that the level of cheating by the Mexican government is 40-50%. Now that's an exaggeration. In reality, probably the Mexicans are cheating by 15-20%, which is a lot, right? 15, not 50. And I think in acre feet, the American way, I think America's share is supposed to be 1.8, 1.9 million acre feet per year, I think. And I think the Mexicans are probably giving the Americans, like I said, 200 or 300,000 acre feet below what they're supposed to. It's a bit complicated because there are many dams, it's a gigantic river. Al-Kabir, grande means big.
Yes.
So it's a very big river, and there are maybe 15, 20 dams around the river. But anyway, what I'm coming at, Trump is right to pressure the Mexicans because they have abused the system. Now, why have they abused the system? Because Trump's predecessors, so the previous presidents, including, by the way, Biden, Clinton, George W. Bush, but also including Trump himself. So Trump himself, eight years ago, in the first Trump presidency, just like Biden and Bush and Clinton, he neglected that issue. And now he's right. He's focusing on that issue, and he wants to increase the output of U.S. farmers, and he wants to keep U.S. farmers happy. So water is critical, and Mexico needs to release more water.
Yes. Well, Mr. Maher Nicholas Fursley, thank you so much for your thorough analysis. Thank you so much. As the tariff clock begins ticking, the U.S.-Mexico relations enter a new phase where environmental agreements, trade leverage, and political calculations collide, with farmers and consumers caught in the middle. This brings us to the end of today's episode of In Focus. My name is Hala Al-Hamalawi. Thank you so much for watching.